And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored in part by Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so much for your support. And if you want to become a patron and help support Where Did the Road Go, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content all month. You can also support the show through donations off the website or pick up some merch. All available at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have back with me Mr. Scott Creighton. Hey, Scott.
Hi, how you doing, Seriah?
And you have a new book out called The Great Pyramid Void Enigma, The Mystery of the Hall of the Ancestors.
Yeah, that's my latest book. I think it came out just at the beginning of July there. So it's just been out for just over a month now, so or a couple of months. So yeah, that's out, and yeah, it's setting the heather on fire as we speak.
I love this book, and I should say, like the last third of the book is kind of adding to some of your previous work. It doesn't have as much to do with the void. It has to do with exploring more evidence that Vyce's marks in the Great Pyramid were likely forgeries.
Yeah, after the Great Pyramid hoax, which came out in 2017, I discovered a whole bunch of new evidence about Colonel Vyce's explorations within the Great Pyramid in 1837, which all just adds to the theory that he and his team basically placed those markings within the chamber. Basically, that these marks are indeed fraudulent, as the evidence would strongly seem to indicate. So yeah, that's the last third of the new book. But I mean, it is connected with the idea of the purpose of the pyramid,
yes,
Seriah, because what Vyce's actions did was it blindsided Egyptology into going down a particular path, because he gave to Egyptology this cartouche from this chamber, the sealed chamber, up until he broke into it within the Great Pyramid. So he gave them that cartouche, so they had concrete evidence that this was the tomb of Khufu, as Herodotus had said almost 2,000 years ago. So in that sense, what Vyce did was blindsided them. Egyptologists didn't have to look any deeper into it. Well, is it really Khufu's tomb? They had the holy grail of evidence presented on a plate to them by Colonel Vyce. So they didn't look any deeper than that. And if they had looked a little bit deeper, they may have come to a completely different conclusion, and that is the conclusion that I come to in the Great Pyramid Void as to why the Great Pyramid Void is there and its purpose, obviously.
So tell people a little bit about the void and how it was discovered.
Well, it was discovered by a group of 30 scientists in November 2017, and they basically there was 3 teams. So they were split into, these 30 scientists were split into 3 teams. And they were doing different tests using muon tomography. Muons are basically byproducts of cosmic rays. So it's kind of, and these particles, these muon particles, are constantly bombarding the Earth, constantly. Now, the thing about muons, it's like they can go through solid rock, right through solid rock, uninterrupted. Now, depending on the density of the rock they're passing through, the speed changes, they're slowed down. So that difference in speed allows scientists using a special film at strategic places throughout the Great Pyramid, I think along the slope of the Grand Gallery and the King's Chamber, so forth and so on. So they placed these special plates with, a very special film, muon sensitive film inside these plates strategically throughout the pyramid, and they were able to detect this huge gap, about 2/3 or more of the way up the Great Pyramid. So it's kind of a bit muon tomography. It's a bit like an X-ray, Seriah.
Yeah.
That's essentially what they did. It was take a massive X-ray of the Great Pyramid, and they found all the other chambers, and they found the passageways connecting these other chambers, but the big void, that chamber that they discovered, this new space, I call it a chamber. Egyptologists are a bit reluctant to call it a chamber. Why? Well, because there's no passages to it. Absolutely zero passages to it. So to them, it's just this big anomaly. That's what Mark Lehner calls it, an anomaly. There's no passages in or out, unlike the other chambers, known chambers of the Great Pyramid. So they did these three teams, and all their findings correlated with one another. They all basically came up with the same finding. There was two teams inside the Great Pyramid using different muon techniques. And there was a third team of scientists outside the Great Pyramid using another method, and they all came back with a sigma rating of, I think, almost 5, if not 5. Almost 99.99% certain that this chamber is real. It does exist inside the Great Pyramid. There were, some people, some Egyptologists have said, well, it could actually be they're interpreting the data wrong, the muon data. There could be a reflection from the Grand Gallery that they're actually observing because of where they placed these muon plates throughout the Great Pyramid. There was a suspicion that it, they might have merely been detecting a ghost image, if you like, a reflection, a ghost image of the Grand Gallery. So in 2019, they did a whole series of other tests. I think they managed to get way above the King's Chamber and the very top most relieving chamber. This is one of the ones that Howard Vyce discovered in 1837. They managed to get some detectors way up there. How to manage it, I'll never know, but anyway, because it's not an easy climb, apparently.
Yeah.
So they managed to get muon detectors are way up there, which is way above the Grand Gallery. So it couldn't be a ghosting image then that they were basically seeing. So they managed to detect the same thing from a way up there and from other strategic places in 2019. So the 2019 results, Seriah, basically confirmed the 2017 results. So there's definitely a massive space. Now, to give your listeners some idea, Seriah, of this space, we're not just talking about a small room of 10 by 15 feet or something like that. This thing is over 100 feet long. Yeah, it's about 25 feet in height and about 10, maybe 12 feet wide. It's about the same dimensions as the Grand Gallery within the Great Pyramid. So it's absolutely enormous.
And also why they were thinking it was a reflection, because it's almost the same dimensions.
Well, that's the reason why they thought it was maybe some kind of ghost image from the Grand Gallery, because it was giving them similar dimensions. So yeah, absolutely. That's why they had to do the second set of tests in 2019 to confirm the first set.
And despite the results of 2019, Egyptologists are still not really fully embracing this, are they? Well,
it's funny, Seriah, when the initial results came out, your usual suspects, your Zahi Hawasses of the world, were saying, this is not a discovery. There's nothing to see here. We know about this. The Great Pyramid is full of voids. Well, come on. That's just abject nonsense. If the Great Pyramid was filled with voids, it would have collapsed thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
This thing's absolutely enormous, and the pyramid hasn't collapsed. So this is, as Mark Lehner says, it's an anomaly. And Mark Lehner's kind of more hedging his bets, But the team that discovered it, the Scan Pyramids team that discovered it, one of their directors is basically saying, I think his name's Tayubi, he's basically saying that, no, this void is real. It was purposefully designed. They can tell by the images that they've retrieved, that it was designed on purpose, very specifically engineered. And he also says, tellingly, I think, that it was not anticipated by any other theory, no theory, including the mainstream tomb theory, anticipated this at all. It's totally hit Egyptology out of the blue, completely left field. It's come at them, and they, this is why I think they're trying to just dismiss it, because where does this fit into the tomb theory? It does not fit into the conventional mainstream tomb theory. Even the great inside the Great Pyramid, the Grand Gallery, Seriah, the struggle with that to fit that into the tomb theory, because most pyramids have only got one chamber. The Great Pyramid, there's only about two other pyramids that have more, other than the Great Pyramid, two other pyramids that have more than one chamber, and that's the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid. The Great Pyramid doesn't. They have three chambers. The Great Pyramid has 4 known chambers, and now there's a 5th one. It's like, it just doesn't fit.
Right.
But, you get... the most recent things I've heard is that the Scan Pyramid team are up in the relieving chambers again, the ones that Howard Vyce opened up in 1837. They're way up there again, trying to find a means to get, not access, but perhaps to drill a small hole to maybe feed an endoscopic camera into the chamber to kind of have a look about. So that's kind of the latest. And Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass are now saying that they think there may be something, from what I've heard, they think there may be something, some significant find to be made inside this big void. Well, I know there is.
Yeah, and it's not what I expected, honestly. But before we get anywhere near that, let's talk about where you're drawing your information from, which is these Coptic Egyptian texts, which are essentially ignored by Egyptology.
Well, that's correct. Now, these Coptic Egyptian texts, as I was saying a few minutes ago, the Coptic, I think, before the program started, the Coptic Egyptians basically believe that they are the custodians of the original Egyptian civilization, going all the way back to the ancient dynasties, the Old Kingdom, and probably even beyond. So we hear people say that, well, the Coptic Egyptians, they've only been around for a couple of thousand years. How could they know anything about the pyramids and the reasons for them being built? This tradition that they passed down, where did they get that from? Because they only, came into sort of being in 2,000 years ago, when they became Christianized. Well, that's just abject nonsense, because just because, a people may change the religion to become Christians, they don't simply dump thousands of years of their history and their heritage the day they become Christians. They don't. That's that's just nonsense. But the thing about the Coptic Egyptians is that they have passed down this ancient Coptic Egyptian tradition, for want of a better word, an oral tradition, and it tells of a completely different purpose and rationale for the construction of the pyramids. Not just one pyramid, all of them. They give an entirely different rationale for them being built. And it's you can see, as we go into it, you can see where confusion would have come around with the tomb theory, but they tell us no, it was for a different purpose entirely. Now, you get some people, bloggers like people like Jason Colavito, who completely dismisses the Coptic Egyptian narrative. He actually attributes it to the Arabic scholars of early medieval period, which is really just a nonsense, because all the Arabic scholars did, I'm not demeaning this in any way, they did a great job in preserving this knowledge. All they did was translate and put into writing what the Coptic Egyptians were telling them.
Right.
Because which is a kind of strange thing as well, if you think about it, Seriah, because ancient Egypt, one of the first literate societies, civilizations in the world, hieroglyphics, hieratic text, they wrote and spoke this and invented paper, so they were a highly literate civilization, comparatively for the time.
Yeah.
And yet they somehow reverted to the oral tradition. Now, why would that be? Why would they be passing down these legends, these so-called legends and myths orally? Well, because in 320 BC, they were invaded by the Macedonians under Alexander the Great and brutally persecuted. The same again happened with Augustus Caesar a few hundred years later. I think that was 33 BC. And then in 620 AD, the Caliph Omar invaded Egypt again. Now, these were all brutal persecutions, and the people weren't... that's the first thing, people that try to conquer other countries do. They try to deny the local population their history.
Right.
They burn all their books and all their records to try and thoroughly conquer them. That's what, this happens all the time, all over the world, and has done, since probably the beginning of humanity. So that's what they did. And the Coptic Egyptians living in Egypt at that time, what they had to do was, because they couldn't write anything down, otherwise they potentially could be, if they were caught doing that, they could be killed.
Yeah.
So the oral tradition became their means, a covert means, if you like, for preserving their history. And that is, they used the oral tradition to pass on their history and their stories to, their future generations. Now, we shouldn't dismiss these oral traditions. People are often too quick, Seriah, I think, to dismiss these oral traditions.
I agree.
These so-called legends.
Yeah, I agree completely.
But you find that actually there's I think one of the oldest legends in human existence is about 30,000 years old. And there's an Australian Aborigine one that's about 10,000 years old. We've actually established that as fact. And these particularly with the Australian Aborigines, because of their climate, the harsh environment that the people there live in, knowing where a waterhole is, in the outback, is crucial to your livelihood, to your life. If you can't find that, you'll die. So they passed down these stories, which would point to where this waterhole was. So they weren't just stories. that they were passing down. They were like survival guides, if you like.
Right.
So that the tribe could continue to survive, and they would tell it as a story, because when you tell stories, they're much easier to remember. But there's a new science, it's about 50 years old now, but that's relatively new. It's now emerging into mainstream science, and it's the science of geomythology. That's what it's called, and it's the science of looking at ancient myths and legends and seeing, well, this dragon that went across the sky, what might that be? Oh, it could be a comet.
Yeah.
This dragon that spouted fire on the land, it could be a volcano.
Right.
So, the science of geomythology is actually now starting to go through our ancient legends and myths to see that, well, might these actually be real events, albeit written allegorically using, sort of fairly sort of colourful, embroidered language. So that is what geomythology tries to do. It tries to turn mythology back into history, and that is helping a lot to unlock a lot of our past that is out of reach, essentially. And I believe, for example, that the legend of Isis and Osiris is actually an allegorical story about the deluge, the coming deluge that afflicted Egypt thousands of years ago, or they believed would afflict ancient Egypt, thousands and thousands of years ago. So again, we can go more into that later, if you like, Seriah.
Yes.
But so mythology is important. As I said a few moments ago, it turns these legends back into history. A geomythology.
Yeah, and they do talk, in these legends. They talk about a flood, and they also talk about what sounds to be some kind of pole shift.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. This is the legend, the Coptic Egyptian legend of Saurid, and it is a Coptic Egyptian legend. It's not an Arabic legend. The Arabic scholars, as I said, merely translated it and put it down in writing. Now, this legend tells us that King Saurid, who academic scholars believe actually is a corruption of the name Sufis, which is Khufu, the guy that built, or we're told built the Great Pyramid. Mm-hmm. They believe that Saurid is a corruption of Khufu, or Sufis Khufu. So this king, apparently, his astronomer priests were observing the sky, and they found that the stars were no longer moving in their normal paths across the night sky. They'd gone wayward. They were moving along in different paths across the sky, and they couldn't understand this. So they explained this to the king, and the king then asked, well, go and measure them, make sure that this is right.
Yeah.
So they measured them, they came back, they're definitely, they're moving in a different pattern. And the king asked, well, what does this mean? And the astronomer priests told the king, it means that in 300 years' time, there will be a great deluge. And it will completely drown the entire kingdom. Everything will be destroyed. That is what the Saurid legend says.
Didn't it start with a dream?
Yeah.
Okay.
These things are always, manifested as dreams to kind of show the power of the king.
Ah, okay.
And they went and measured the stars again. I don't think that was part of the dream aspect of the narrative. So
right.
They went and measured the stars again, and they came back and told them that there's going to be this almighty deluge which will destroy
right
everything. And Surid, he said, well, okay, what we're going to do is build pyramids. And into these pyramids, we are going to place everything that the kingdom will need in order to be reborn after the floodwaters have subsided, after the flood has abated. We will place everything inside these structures for the kingdom to be reborn. And that is what the Saurid legend says. Now, the thing is, you mentioned earlier, Seriah, about pole shift. Stars generally don't change their course, at least not that it's observable to us, watching them each night. They don't change their course. Yeah, over the course of a year, we can see that because of the Earth's orbit around the sun. But we're talking about, they're tracking, a particular path across the sky, a particular time of year. It's changed. Now, it's not the stars that change their path. It's the Earth below it that's changing its orientation relative to the stars. So, in other words, the Earth was turning in a strange way, and I suspect the Earth was turning over a full 180-degree turn. The reason I say that is because there is a lot of ancient texts which talk about this. Ancient Greek texts, Chinese texts, South American texts, Eskimo texts, and several ancient Egyptian texts talk about this, how the Earth turned over. The Bible says it itself in a 2 or 3 places, I believe. And one of the ancient Egyptian texts tells that the sun rose in the west and set in the east, and that this change happened twice, not once but twice, in prehistory. So now the thing about that, Seriah, is it's actually really interesting, because a lot of people think, well, if for the sun to rise in the west and set in the east, the Earth would need to slow down and start spinning the opposite direction. But that isn't actually the case. The book goes into this in great depth, showing the research and the discovery of the physicist, a chap called Peter Warlow, who discovered the effect of, or what I call the Tippe-Top Effect, whereby the Earth can tumble over, but its axis can remain fixed, essentially remain fixed. And in that scenario, it sounds counterintuitive, but in that scenario, what that means is when the Earth does turn over, the sun will rise in the west and set in the east. It's absolutely amazing research that this physicist has done. But that answers that question that had always been thrown at researchers that proposed that or the belief in that particular Egyptian text would say, oh, that's just bunk, that can't happen. Well, actually, it can. Now, the other thing as well is, like, you see things, evidence like, are you familiar with the dream stela, between the paws of the Sphinx?
Which is what told them to uncover it.
Yeah, that's right, Tutmosis. Yeah, see, again, it's this dream theme. It's like, by couching things within a dream, it adds power to the king that he foresaw this, So anyway, Tutmosis, the dream stela between the paws of the Sphinx. Now, at the very top of the dream stela, there are actually 2 sphinxes carved into the dream stela, and they're placed back to back. 180 degrees facing in opposite directions, 180 degrees. Now, just above the head of these two sphinxes is the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic for the sunrise. It's the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic for the sunrise. It's just at the head of these two sphinxes. So the head of these two sphinxes are essentially facing the sunrise in two different horizons, which is just mind-blowing to me. Some people think that, well, it's maybe there's another sphinx somewhere over the desert over there.
Right.
But I think what it's actually showing is because of those two sunrise hieroglyphics just above the head of the Sphinx on the dream stela is pointing to the sunrise in the east, but it actually once rose in the west. I think that's what that is telling us. And it's the same as well, if you think about it. If the sun, the ancient Egyptians, Seriah, had a great reverence for the sunrise, because that was the place of rebirth and regeneration. If you wanted to be reborn again, that's where it would happen, where the sun rises. The sun rises. Now, that's why the Sphinx, or the Egyptologists say that it faces towards the east, because that is where the sun rises. So then I'm thinking, well, okay, but if that's the revered place of rebirth in the east, why are all the pyramids of the old kingdom, or well, all the pyramids, I think except for one pyramid, I think the Black Pyramid, which is a complete anomaly, but anyway, all of the pyramids are on the west bank of the Nile. Now, Egyptologists say, well, that's because that's the place of death. That's the land of the dead. Well, no, I don't want to be in the land of the dead. I want to be reborn. I want to be on the east side of the Nile. I want to build my pyramid there, because that's the place of rebirth. That's the place the Sphinx faces towards the rebirth. But no, they built all the pyramids on the west bank, the land of the dead, when you want to be reborn. That doesn't make sense. You go inside these pyramids, what do you find? You find the sarcophagus, or the so-called sarcophagus. They're not sarcophagi at all.
Right.
But anyway, that's another story. These stone boxes are always inside the chamber. They're always in the west side of the chamber, again towards the land of the dead.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense. It's totally contradictory to the Sphinx, which is facing the eastern horizon, the place where rebirth occurs. Now, if there was an inversion, if the Earth did invert, and the sun is now rising in the west, and they're now starting to build pyramids, where are they going to build them? They're going to build them where the sun now rises, which is in the west. Hence, they're on the west, that bank of the Nile. Now, this was reversed again. This is what I said earlier. This happened twice. This flipping seems to be not a regular occurrence, but it seems to be, this flipping of the Earth seems to be part of a long cycle. So it hasn't just happened once, it happened at least twice that we know of from the ancient Egyptians. So it's flipped back upwards again to where we are now. So we see the west where the sun now sets. So it looks contradictory now. But when they built the pyramids, the Earth, the sun probably was rising in the west, and they built them on the west bank of the Nile. They put their so-called stone boxes, their sarcophagi, in the west end of the so-called burial chamber. And then you have other things, Seriah. You have things like burial customs. Burial customs now, or sort of most recent ancient burials I'm talking about in Egypt, when they open these tombs, they find and graves. They find that the occupant is generally always facing east, towards the sunrise.
Right.
Yeah. But when you go way back, they're facing towards the west. Now, I don't think it's their custom that's changed, that they suddenly wanted to face the land of the dead instead of, the land of rebirth. I think they've always faced the land of rebirth, but that the land of rebirth was once in the west, just as the ancient Egyptian texts tell us. So I know that's kind of a lot to sort of take in, but that there's a lot of evidence the world over which tells us, Seriah, that this pole shift event, which the Coptic Egyptian texts tell us happened, or strongly suggest happened, probably did indeed happen. There are a lot of evidence about it.
So would that mean the Sphinx was built first?
Yes.
So why did they build that on the west side of the Nile?
Well, the Sphinx was built. The Sphinx is built currently on the east side because it was built before the first tilt, when the sun did rise in the east. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Earth tilts. The sun's now rising in the west. They're building the pyramids on the west, but the Sphinx was built before the pyramids. That's why it's facing east. Yeah. So that
right. But what I'm saying, it's still on the west side of the Nile, though, isn't it?
No, it's not about. Yeah, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying, but it's facing east.
Yeah, right.
It's facing towards. It's facing towards the sunrise. Yeah, because when they built the Sphinx, that's where the sun was. But all the pyramids are built to, well, certainly at Giza we can see, so all the pyramids there are towards the west of the Sphinx. But I believe, in my opinion, that the Sphinx, I can't say that why they built the Sphinx on the west side of the Nile. I can't say, it may have been for an entirely different reason, but they built it there and it faces the dawn.
Well, it's also built out of basically solid rock, so maybe that's the thing they found that would work best to carve it. Well,
it may be something as mundane as that. Yeah. Well, there's a knoll protruding out of this massive piece of limestone rock. So it had this round feature at the top already, which they could carve into a lion's head. So it may be something as mundane as that, or as practical as that was the reason why the Sphinx was built on, that side of the Nile. But if it's facing the dawn, that's the key. It's facing the dawn.
Right.
Right. If the land of the dead was the sacred place, why isn't the Sphinx facing the opposite way, where the land of the dead is the west? This is the explanation that Egyptologists give us as to why all the pyramids are built on the west side of the Nile and not on the east side of the Nile.
So you talk about various reasons for the pole, that something that could cause a pole shift. And one of the ones that struck me as interesting, I was not familiar with, was the atomic core explosion. And you could explain a little bit about that, and also the fact that the information or the paper that was written about it was actually censored by the CIA, was it?
Yeah, that's right. This was a book. It's called the Adam and Eve story, and I think it was written by a chap called Chan Thomas in the 1950s. Actually, I think was the original, when he originally wrote the book, and for some reason, and it's never come to light, Chan Thomas in this Adam and Eve book, he talks about different ages of man, going through these cyclical pole shift events. This is what he also understands, is that the Earth does go through this regular cyclical event of a pole shift, and he basically came up with this theorized idea of an explosion, that the Earth's core essentially explodes so many every thousands of years or whatever. I can't quite remember the figure that he placed on it. But I think it's maybe about 3,500 years, something like every 3,500 years, the Earth core has a nuclear explosion, which essentially heats up the interior of the Earth to such a degree that the magma, it's fairly sort of just under the Earth's lithosphere, just under the crust. It's fairly sort of gooey and sticky, or almost like plastic. This heats up and eventually becomes liquid, which causes the outer shell of the Earth to freely move. It's pulled by gravitational forces. That's essentially part of it. That's it, basically. There's a fair bit more to it than that. So that's essentially what he proposed, and for some reason, parts of it have been redacted, blacked out by the CIA, and there's just I think a very limited version of the book now available. I think it became available again in the 1990s, something like that anyway, I believe. So yeah, that's a fascinating story, about just one of the potential. We're not saying that this is how it would happen. It's just no one knows how these pole shift events happen. There's various possibilities that are now coming to the fore that scientists are looking into, because it was always thought in the past that it would take a planet-sized object smashing into the Earth to cause the Earth to tilt over. Such was the force of the Earth's equatorial bulge, keeping it upright, keeping it stable.
Right.
It would require something the size of the Earth itself colliding with us to topple the Earth over, which would basically be an extinction level event.
Right. Right.
It would vaporize every microorganism on the planet. So obviously that has never occurred. And so that's the reason why a lot of scientists believe to this day that it's impossible for the Earth to tilt over, because the stabilizing effect of the Earth's equator, the bulge of the Earth's equator, is too great to overcome. But this is where, physicists like Peter Warlow, come into play and show actually it's not that difficult. Other guys like Flavio Barbiero, he was an Italian naval officer, and I believe he also is a physicist. He also shows how a relatively small comet or asteroid, about a quarter of a kilometre in diameter, striking the Earth's ocean just at the right spot, can cause the Earth to topple over. So there's these various different mechanisms. You've probably seen the Zhanibekov effect, Seriah. Have you heard of the Seriah? Yeah, the Zhanibekov effect, where he was a Russian cosmonaut in the Salyut 7 space station back in the 1980s. And what he was unscrewing a T-handle from a wall racket, a wall mounting, and he just spun it round, and it spun free from its bolt hole, spun free and carried on spinning through the zero gravity of the space station. Now, every so often, without any external force being applied or torque, this T-handle flipped by itself 180 degrees. It would carry on spinning in a straight line, continue on, then it would flip again another 180 degrees, and then again, and then again, and then again. It kept doing this, flipping back and forth, back and forth.
Right.
And the Russian government kept that hidden, kept that secret for something like 10 years because they wanted to understand what the heck is going on here. What is going on here? So it turns out, it transpires that we've known about this effect, mathematically speaking, since the early 1900s, I believe, or 1800s even. We've known about this effect mathematically, and it's now called today the intermediate axis theorem, or the tennis racket theorem.
Right.
Whereby essentially a spinning body will eventually find its most stable axis, and it will settle around that axis. Okay, so if there's a small imbalance on an object such as the T-handle or a tennis racket, that will cause this 180 degree flip to occur. Slightest, tiniest imbalance cause it to flip around its secondary axis of rotation. So scientists say that the Earth has found its most stable axis, and because it's a sphere, it does not have a secondary axis. It only has the one rotational axis, unlike a box, a cube. Yeah, right, it can be flipped. Three different ways. So anyway, this is what they say. But I'm thinking, well, we have all this evidence, all these, let's call them eyewitness testimonies from all over the world, from ancient times, that say, no, the sun rose over there, the Earth did, tilt over. And, they tell us this. There's texts from Plato, I believe, even tell us that this happened. So, and Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision, that book just is incredible. It just explains it all so clearly, and all these different sources. So anyway, what the scientists today say, well, the Earth is a rotating sphere. It's got the equatorial bulge. It cannot tip over. But there's now, as I said, there's these other scientists that are showing ways, actually, it doesn't need a planet-sized object to smash into us. The Earth can tilt over. And they're showing the mathematics to actually prove, or theoretically at least, to prove that it can happen. Now, what I wonder is, well, supposing, the Earth was tilted over by, say, a comet, just, whereby the great ice sheets that covered the North America and Europe, about 15, 20,000 years ago, were suddenly nudged a few degrees south or 5 degrees south, and they went into a meltdown. Yeah. But they're still over the landmass of America and Europe. But what's happening is they're melting from the center outwards.
Yes. Yeah.
So what you're ending up with is this massive sea of water, like Glacial Lake Agassiz, Glacial Lake Missoula, building up in central landmass of America, these massive glacial lakes. And then eventually the ice dams that are keeping this sea, this massive sea of water in one place, suddenly breaches and charges towards the oceans. That's why you've got the channeled scablands in the northwest region of America. So And that water there you have a sudden massive displacement of a massive volume from one part of the Earth to another in literally a day or 2 days. This massive shift in weight.
Yeah.
You're creating an imbalance. You're creating a secondary axis of rotation. That's what you're doing. And that's all it needs for the Earth. You need a secondary rotation of axis for even the Janet-Beckhoff effect to have a chance of occurring. But there you have it. That imbalance can generate this secondary axis, and if it's just the right circumstances, that may then induce the Janet-Beckhoff effect.
So as far as I'm aware, the science says that the ice caps, like scientists will fully admit they don't know how the ice caps melted as fast as they did. Because initially they said they melted down slowly over thousands of years, but then evidence has shown that they didn't. They actually melted down fairly quickly, which is why Robert Schoch, suggests that it was a solar flare that did it. Other people have suggested it was a meteorite impact. You have people who suggest that it was part of the whole Velikovsky, Mars, Venus sort of thing. So, I mean, that's, probably a bunch of different stuff happening all at once.
Well, absolutely. These great Earth changes of the Younger Dryas period about 12,000 years ago, all sorts of things were happening to the world then, Seriah. You've got the extinction of the megafauna, the extinction of the megaflora. There was a human bottleneck then. The human populations all over the world dived at that time as well, 12,000 years ago. Something catastrophic happened. Absolutely catastrophic happened to this planet back then. There's no question about it. We're now getting evidence from, I think it's called the Greenland impact hypothesis,
yes,
or the comet impact hypothesis in Greenland, which is showing, just a whole bunch of evidence, which just, makes the case for a cataclysmic event at that time just undeniable that it happened. And this is, in my view, the pyramid building, the pole shift that the Surid legend tells us about, this is all connected to that event. This essentially was, if the Earth did turn over sometime during that cataclysmic event, maybe not in the initial impact, if it was a comet, maybe the comet was the initial trigger, then there was some, that was a catalyst for the ice melting, then the water, suddenly moving from one part of the planet. We don't know the exact mechanism. We can't really, need a lot more people with open minds to go and look into this much deeper than I can. I'm not a scientist.
Right.
But I read a lot of scientific papers.
Yeah.
And, so it needs a lot of different disciplines to look into this, because something, as I said, something very, very catastrophic occurred on this planet around 12,000 years ago. And something else happened probably about 5,000 years before that also. And then we have these, the meltwater pulse 1A, which was about almost 12,000 years ago. Catastrophic flooding of the Earth, I think.
You think that was only 12,000?
I think so. I think about 11,600 years ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. My brain misheard that number completely. I'm sorry.
11,600 years ago. Yeah.
Right.
So, around the time, actually, Plato says that Atlantis sank.
Right.
So there you go, folks. I've used the A word, that no one's supposed to ever talk about. Anyway.
But that's the thing with the Atlantis legend, is it does fit with the scientific data.
Well, it does, yeah. And, I don't know if you've seen all the new material that's coming out just now, Seriah, about the Rikat structure in Mauritania, or the Eye of the Sahara, or the Eye of Africa, I think it's called, where they've got these concentric rings.
Yes, yeah.
Just to the south of the Atlas Mountains. And if you look at the map of Herodotus, where does Herodotus say the people of Atlantis lived? Right where this eye of, the Africa is. These concentric rings. It's it's absolute the research and some of the videos that are now appearing that I think this really could be a major breakthrough about our planet. Yeah, it's now about 1,100 feet above sea level. So what? I think North America with the ice cap was about more than that below. When all that ice was pushing the crust of the Earth down, when that all disappeared, I think North America rebounded by about 1,500 feet or more.
Yeah, and it's still it's still rebounding.
It's still, yeah, absolutely. So, there's no reason why in the past this area of Mauritania, where this Rikat structure is, these three concentric rings, couldn't have been, 1,000 or so feet lower, where it did meet. It was at sea level, where there would have been, the sea coming into the harbour from the west. But the scientists say, well, these three rings, they're a natural feature of, it's this bubble that bubbles up from a volcano, and then it sort of solidifies, and it creates these concentric rings, something like that.
Right.
That's how this is formed. Yeah. So what? We're not saying that those are the buildings that the people used, but they may have used these concentric rings, as filled them as canals, as we're told, and built, various houses and buildings, whatever, on top of these natural limestone or whatever rings. They might have been the foundations of this city of Atlantis. But it's just incredible that these concentric rings, which Atlantis was, and it's the right size as well.
Yeah.
It's all these different things about it. It just, the people that used to live there are called the Atlantis.
Really?
It's there on Herodotus' 2,000-year-old map. This map of Herodotus, right in this area, Mauritania, where the Rikat structure is, you see Herodotus is written the Atlantis, the tribe, the people that lived there. And just to the north of it is the Atlas Mountains, which again Plato talks about in the myth of Atlantis. It's just a remarkable correlation, if you could call it that, of different things kind of coming together. But who knows? And again, it's something else that needs more research, more people with open minds, because so many people just and they don't want to know, and they've got preconceived notions. But yeah, go there and see, well, here's what Plato says, and this is what we've found.
Yeah. You talk in here about the monuments having like more than one orientation, and you're, I think, only the second person I've ever heard mention this. The first was the book by Ren Flamath and Colin Andrews, where they talk about the not just that a lot of these ancient monuments have two or more orientations toward former poles, but also that they're arranged sort of in a golden ratio from one another.
Right. Okay. I'm trying to actually get my head around that particular pyramids having different positions. I'm not quite sure what that is.
Well, you suggested that it points to a previous North Pole more accurate, and some of them point to the current North Pole. Like some of the orientations, like the shaft in the Queen's Chamber, and stuff like that, and the shafts coming out of the pyramid.
Yeah, I think some of the older pyramids. Now, this isn't actually my theory, but I've heard that some other ancient monuments, basically, they're not aligned true north. And some of them are off by quite some way, unlike the pyramids of Giza. So like 13 degrees, and they're off by, and sometimes even a little bit more. So what these other researchers, I think Mark Carlotto and Mark Gaffney have discovered is that, if you take one of these pyramids and line it and run a line through it, and then take all the way up to the North Pole, where it goes up through the Arctic Circle, you take another line from another monument from another side of the world, from the other side of the world, and see where they intersect. These 2 points in the Arctic intersect, and they have discovered that so many of these misaligned monuments around the Earth actually cross over at the same point, and at several different points. There's like a cluster of monuments which seem to show, three or four different previous poles.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting, because that's kind of what Charles Hapgood wrote of in Earth's Shifting Crust.
Yes.
That there were the Earth's pole has moved. He presented an absolute ton of research in his book Earth's Shifting Crust, and his subsequent book The Path of the Pole. So, but what I found in taking all these different pole positions of these other researchers, I think Hapgood found 4 different positions of the Earth's former pole. Mark Gaffney found, I think, 1 in Baffin Island, and Mark Carlotto found a couple northwest Greenland and in the Bering Sea. Now, what I did in this may have been what you're referring to earlier, is what I realised is that actually all these different former poles actually can be connected with a logarithmic spiral. And that, to me, is just, really, really strong evidence that a pole shift has in fact occurred, because this spiral effectively is the path that each time this happens, it goes around this spiral, and it stops at different points. Different pole shifts will stop at different positions along this particular spiral path.
Right.
So this spiral, the Earth can't just suddenly, because of the various laws of motion, it can't suddenly just stop and go in a different direction. It has to, the laws of angular momentum have to keep it going. The conservation of angular momentum have to keep it going in the same direction. So for the Earth to tilt over, it can't do it in a straight line. It has to do it in a spiral. It has to do it in a spiral. And that is what you see with these different pole shift positions that these other researchers have pinpointed. They can be connected with a logarithmic spiral, and I show that in the book. So yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I think the evidence, Seriah, that that the Earth does do these flips, and I listen to scientists that say, well, it can't happen, but then you've now got other scientists saying, well, actually, you know what? Look at this mathematics here. We're showing you mathematically, as physicists and mathematicians, that it can happen. Earth's, stabilizing bulge can be overcome, and relatively simply too.
So I just blanked away. Oh, one of the things you mention in here is that if you flip the Earth 180 degrees, then the Giza pyramids line up perfectly with Orion.
Yeah, how funny is that? I mean, there's it goes back to this the great debate between Robert Bauval and the director of the Griffiths Observatory in Los Angeles, Dr. Ed Krupp. Now, back when Robert Bauval's book, The Orion Mystery, first came out, I think back in the early 1990s, Robert Bauval showed the correlation between the Giza pyramids and the Orion belt stars. Then Ed Krupp was looking at the pyramids and the belt star, and they were on opposite sides of the page in Robert Bauval's book, which he wrote incidentally with Adrian Gilbert. And Krupp noticed something. He says, well, wait a minute, no, that's not right. He noticed that from a purely or strictly modern convention, astronomical convention, the pyramids were actually the wrong way around. Strictly from an astronomical point of view, to properly correlate with the Orion belt stars. Now, I looked into this, and Krupp is technically correct, although Bauval and latterly Graham Hancock, they're advocating an artistic license, as it were. Well, you look at the line of the stars in the sky and they go like that. Well, if you were to draw that naturally, that is how you would draw it, and that is how you would place that drawing on the plateau. And they're right too, but from a strict point of view, Krupp is also correct from an astronomical point of view. And what Krupp famously said at the time is, well, to be astronomically correct, for Bauval's theory to be astronomically correct, Giza would have to be turned upside down. That's what he said. So there you have it. I'm basically arguing what Krupp is actually saying. For it to fit Orion's belt more accurately, it has to be upside down. So there you go.
Right. And not only that, but you mentioned one of the chambers, I can't remember which one now, but everything is basically backwards or upside down in there too.
Chambers backwards, upside down. This is the I think this is an appendix. The appendix is to do with the quarry marks that Colonel Vyce discovered.
No. There's a star map somewhere, and I did not make a note of it. Oh man. And it's not correct unless you turn everything upside down. It's not in the Great Pyramid.
Yes. Yeah, the tomb of Sekemut.
Okay.
Yeah. If you look at the astronomical ceiling of he was the architect of Queen Hatshepsut and second, I think, and it's this astronomical ceiling in this tomb of this architect. And when you look at it, you actually have to look at it north for everything to be the right way up. But then when you're looking at it that way, Orion is following Sirius, or Osiris is following Isis across the sky. Now, when we normally look at the stars, we don't see the Orion belt stars in the north, we see the Orion belt stars in the south. And Sirius, Isis, follows Osiris, Orion's belt across the sky. The other thing you find is that Sirius in the Sekemut ceiling is higher than Orion. Sirius is higher than Orion, or
Right.
Isis is much taller than Orion, which again, Sirius can only be higher than Orion if the Earth is flipped up. It's flipped over 180 degrees.
Yeah.
That's the only time. And that's the way people in the southern hemisphere would see Sirius and Orion. They would see Sirius is higher in the sky than Orion. And that's what we have on this this Cenobite ceiling. And there's other things as well, like it's got the planets. They are again shown on the ceiling higher than they are in the northern hemisphere. Essentially, you can only view them in this particular place in the sky relative to the other astronomical features of the ceiling from the southern hemisphere. That's where they make sense.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible. It's all this ton of stuff, all this evidence. And they're I mean, one of the pieces that I find of a pole shift having occurred has actually been with us in plain sight since the 1960s, when Dr. Virginia Trimble, along with her colleague Alexander Bodaway, she did some calculations which showed that the southern shaft of the King's Chamber would have targeted Orion's belt, and the centre of Orion's belt around 2550 BC. And this was hailed by Egyptology as, it was welcomed as, confirmation that, the Great Pyramid was built then, because this particular shaft targeted, Orion belt stars at that period, at the time Khufu was supposed to have lived. And they see this as this was built for Khufu's soul to, go to Orion. And then for some reason it would also go to the stars in the north, and it was a separate shaft for that, and another shaft to go to the stars in the south. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway,
Right.
the king's soul, it's like it needs these 4 different shafts. Well, again, to me that didn't make any sense. Anyway, so she dated the pyramid to 2550 BC. Now Robert Bivall comes along about 30 years later, using a slightly different astronomical method, but also using Orion's belt, but in a slightly different way to date the pyramids. And he came up with the date of 10,500 BC. Now, both techniques are absolutely valid. They're absolutely valid. But the thing is, Seriah, and I explain this at great length in the book, both of those dates should have matched. What we have got is an 8,000-year discrepancy, when there shouldn't be a discrepancy between those dates at all.
Right.
They both should either be 2,500 or 10,500. There shouldn't be a discrepancy. And I explain it at length in the book why that would be. It's too lengthy to go into here, but it shouldn't have happened. And what that tells me, the only reason, or one of the most logical reasons to explain that astronomical 8,000-year gap, is to invoke a pole shift event caused this astronomical discrepancy between Bivall's method and Trimble's method. And as I said, I explain it at length in the book.
Yeah.
And that to me really is a major piece of evidence, actually, as are the 2 sets of so-called Queen's pyramids at Giza. They basically show Orion's belt moving from one hemisphere, the northern hemisphere, into the southern hemisphere, the shift by 146.5 degrees. And I explain also that if it's that kind of shift, then Giza would have to have been located previously at just about 3.5 degrees north of the equator. And that, for the Orion's belt to make that kind of shift, 146 0.5 degrees, Giza would have to have been at 3.5 degrees north of the equator and shifted to about 30 degrees south of the equator. So that equates to this 146.5 degrees shift. Okay? Now, what we have when the stars in the plateau, if you look at the northern set of these sort of satellite pyramids, when you look at them, the ones beside the Great Pyramid, and then you compare them with the ones to the south of this G3, the smallest pyramid at Giza. When you compare them, the ones at G3 are slightly smaller than the ones beside the Great Pyramid. They're very slightly smaller. And Egyptology doesn't really know why that is. But if you look at the stars in the northern hemisphere, belt stars, and then you shift them to the southern hemisphere by this amount, 146.5 degrees, but at 39 point, just under 40 degrees altitude above the local horizon, you find that the stars in the southern hemisphere are slightly dimmer and slightly smaller than the ones when they're in the northern hemisphere. Mm-hmm. It's a really strange phenomena. The other thing I was going on to say, this 3.5 degree location of Giza, another researcher has shown that there's this great ring of monuments around the world that all line up with this circle. The Nazca Lines, Easter Island, Giza, all the, Machu Picchu, all these ancient sacred sites are within a few degrees, or 2 or 3 degrees of this ring.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely fascinating, because that then almost is circumstantial evidence that, Giza was at 3.5 degrees north, and that correlates with this shift of Orion's belt by 146.5 degrees. And that's what the satellite pyramids at Giza are actually showing us. So there's a lot there in the book. The new book goes into it in a lot more depth.
Oh yeah, definitely.
As I'm sure you know.
Is there anything in those satellite pyramids? Are they solid or?
Well, there are chambers. There's what's called the two cult pyramids. They're the smallest of all the Giza pyramids. There are 9, 10, 11 pyramids at Giza.
Okay.
In total. There's the three biggies, the three big pyramids.
Right.
Then there's 2 sets of 3 so-called Queen's pyramids. And then there's the 2 tiny cult pyramids. One of the cult pyramids is beside the Great Pyramid on the east side, and one is another cult pyramid is on the south side of the middle pyramid, G2. So, but there's no chambers in them. In fact, there's no actual pyramid there anymore. It's just basically the foundations that the found of those pyramids. But they're very, very small. There's no chambers in the cult pyramids. But all the other pyramids, the small satellite pyramids, they all have chambers inside them. Because, as I said, King Surid was building these as recovery system for his kingdom. Right. But they were, multi-leveled. The plan was multi-leveled. The satellite pyramids, as well as acting as vaults for storage for everything that the kingdom would need, all sorts of seeds. And they found tons of seeds under Sept Pyramid at Saqqara. They found tons, and Cecil Firth in the 1920s, when he first investigated that pyramid, the passageways under the Sept Pyramid, there are like 3.5 miles of passages under that pyramid. Yeah. And at times, he was walking through these passages, almost up to his knees in grain, the amount of grain, seeds stored under there. So And also the Great Pyramid as well. There's evidence in the Great Pyramid of massive amounts of seeds, grain that must have been stored at some point in the past in there. And again, I explain that in the book. But yeah, so they all had specific functions to do specific practical things like store seeds and other tools and other items that were essential for the rebirth of the kingdom. But they also had an astronomical function as well. They were designed to show us what happened and when it happened. It's also a clock that works as an astronomical clock as well. They put an awful lot of thought into what they were doing. It shows us what happened with the shafts. The shafts in the Great Pyramid show us a pole shift event occurred because it shows the Earth. The shafts basically show the Earth turning over. Right. And again, I explain how it does that in the book. The northern shafts, as you know, are peculiar because when you extend the trajectories of the northern shafts of the Great Pyramid, the two trajectories, they cross over each other.
Right.
Whereas the shafts that come out of the southern side of the Great Pyramid, they don't cross over each other. Now that crossover is absolutely, a smoking gun, if you like, for a pole shift event. It's basically showing up became down. That's what it's telling us. And I explain how it works in the book. But, so yeah, the chambers would have stored all this material for the recovery of the kingdom. It's what I call Project Osiris, because they built 16 of these. They actually built 19 of them, but 3 of them were unfinished. And they were packing these pyramids, this Osiris project, because Osiris was the god of rebirth, the god of regeneration, and because the pyramid texts, the ancient Egyptians' pyramid texts, they tell us quite explicitly the pyramid is Osiris. That's what it says. It also says the construction of the pyramids is Osiris. It's a construction of Osiris. That's what they tell us.
Right.
And this is why, Osiris, one of the titles of Isis, who's the consort of Osiris, one of her titles is Isis, mistress of the pyramids. Now, people think of that. How? What does that mean, mistress of the pyramids? Well, what does that mean? But when you realise what the pyramid texts tell us, the pyramids are Osiris. So she is the mistress of Osiris.
Yeah.
Mistress of the pyramids, because the pyramids are Osiris. You see what I'm saying there. So that and the legend of Osiris tells us, of Isis and Osiris, is that Osiris's body was cut into 16 pieces. How many pyramids did the ancient Egyptians in the Old Kingdom complete? 16.
Yeah.
Pyramids. What did Seth do when he cut Osiris's body up into 16 pieces? He scattered it along the banks of the Nile, throughout the land of Egypt. That's what he did. So it's an allegorical tale, the story of Isis and Osiris. It's an allegorical tale of the construction of this project Osiris, about the rebirth of the kingdom. They were building Osiris on the ground, this recovery system. It also tells us, Seriah, it also tells us that Osiris's evil brother Seth trapped Osiris in a sarcophagus and drowned him in the Nile. Well, that again, that's another allegory. It's a metaphor. It's saying Osiris will be drowned. And that is exactly what they were expecting to happen. They were expecting a flood to drown the entire kingdom. What would it drown? It would drown the body of Osiris as well, the pyramids. So again, it's this allegory that that they're telling us about. We just have to, have the right tools and the right mindset, in a sense, to try and get to grips with exactly what it is they're trying to say.
So we're out of time for this show. The book is The Great Pyramid Void Enigma, The Mystery of the Hall of the Ancestors, and people can pick this up pretty much anywhere at this point, right?
Yeah, you can. I'm always a believer in supporting your local bookstore. So, keep people in jobs, so get down there if you can. Also from the publisher, Inner Traditions Bear Company, or from the usual large online vendors. You can go there also. So, yeah.
And online, people can find you where?
Oh, yeah. You can find me about... I've got a landing page at my publisher, and I host the alternative Egyptology forum on ATS, above topsecret.com. So if you go to the main page there, scroll down, you'll see the Scott Creighton forum on there. You can pop in, start a topic, ask me a question. I'll try and do my best to answer.
All right. And we'll have you back next week for part 2.
See you then.
In 2019, the first Strange Realities Conference took place in Nashville, Tennessee. The pandemic and turmoil the following year could not stop 2020's conference from thriving in cyberspace as a live streaming event. Now, for 2021, the third annual Strange Realities Conference will combine these worlds into a paranormal hybrid event, live in person in Nashville and streaming online. Join us in exploring just how truly strange our reality can be with an interdimensional lineup of speakers presenting unique and intellectual perspectives on magic, mysteries, and the paranormal.
Featuring Alan Greenfield, Dr. J. Michael Bennett, aka Dr. Future, Tim Bernal, Seriah Ascaf, Dr. Stephen Finley, Aaron Gullius, Amy Pachula, Brent Rains, Chris Ernst, Heather Mosier, Michael Hughes, Jose Herrera, Joshua Cutchin, Kiki Dombrowski, Nathan Isaac, P.D. Newman, Steven Snyder, aka Recluse, David Metcalf, Timothy Renner, Steve Stockton, and Bren Collier. Tickets available at strangerealities.com.
It's gonna be amazing.
I want to take a moment here to give a shout out to all of my Patreons, especially those pledging $10 or more every month. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Eric Hervin, Tim, Andrew Nichols, 100th Monkey Project, A.E. Gaia Quinta, Alex Whitcomb, Alfred Tuttle, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy Incommunicable, Chris Ernst, Craig Cisternos, Craig Parmenter, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Dominic O'Malley, Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Johanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kevin L., Layla Malden, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Sedgder, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Tyler Glimstead, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, William Lovelace, Rand Collier, Stephen D., and Vincent Treewell. And an extra special thanks to Vincent for writing up recaps of every week's show. Thank you all so very much. You really do make this show possible. So this interview is far from over. There is a whole nother show with Scott, and then an extensive Patreon segment on top of that to cover all the stuff I wanted to talk to Scott Creighton about. So if you enjoyed that, that'll all be coming up in the next next week you'll get part 2. And if you're a patron, you'll get that whole extra segment as well. And you can become a patron by going to wheredidtheroadgo.com and clicking on the Patreon link. Additionally, as a Patreon, you get the shows a week early. So they will run on VBR, and then a week later they'll be posted, but Patreons will get them around the time they run on VBR. So if you want to be a week ahead, become a patron. It's only $3 a month, and it helps the show out greatly.
And it's very much appreciated. You can also rate us and review us at your favorite podcaster and such. If you want to send us your weird experiences, stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com. General stuff can be sent to contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.